everybody, good morning and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips. It's me, Anne, and your disembodied Justin is somewhere off in the ether. He had to start the stream from his phone, so he is even more disembodied than usual. Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Wyvern Day. Yes, it is Wyvern Day. Although we are going to do some putty on the Wyvern first. Which could be good or could be bad, depending on if you want to paint on the Wyvern today. Paint on the Wyvern will not happen today because we have to putty him. Because he definitely has some gaps going on. And we could maybe put some paint on his wings, on his back. That would probably work. We could probably do that. If we get done with the puttying, we can maybe put some wings on, or some paint. It's one of those days, guys. It's one of those weeks. Yay! Yay! Actually, I was going to look up Wyvern art. Wyvern. Ooh, recipe for candied orange peels is on my phone. That's pretty cool too. Wyvern art. I could do Dungeons and Dragons. Oh, okay, that's kind of a cool one. Huh, images. There's lots of good Wyvern art, actually. So one that's like green, kind of olives and reds. And one that's kind of more like, that's pretty cool. That's a pretty good color scheme, guys. And it's very orange. It's very, very orange. More than red-brown. But I like the cream-colored kind of gray underbelly. And I like the kind of blue-black top. And there's some striping, tiger striping, in the model. And stripes on the wings, which I was going to do stripes on the wings, but not quite in that way. Hey, Bob and Julie, we're just talking about what color scheme we want to put on your Wyvern. Although we're going to do puttying today. To get his legs puttied, his join puttied. But yeah, I like this Wyvern concept art. I like it a lot. Let's see here. There's some good ones in here. But yeah, I also like that kind of olive green and red one. That's kind of cool. That is more of a brown one with orange and red, a little bit of green hints. I don't like that one as much as I like the stripey one. But I guess, you could do it any color you wanted to, really. Just looking at, there's another one that's kind of brown with red-orange. So far, I like the stripey one the best. There's a more traditional one. But I think the winner is this one. It's much more exotic than most people paint their Wyverns. And I was already thinking of kind of a light gray or cream kind of underbelly, and this kind of does both. So we could probably use some Osirian sand and some wolf gray to mix some neutral tones in here. Actually, probably desert sand and Osirian sand. Looking at this, desert sand, desert stone would probably work great. And then I really like that blue-black on the top of the head that works into the stripes. So that's pretty cool, and I like the stripies. So kind of a dark reddish brown, but very much more saturated than is standard. And I like the darker paws too. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, I think he's the winner. I think that's the winner. Yeah, this is probably the best Wyvern color scheme I've seen as far as making it interesting. There's a little bit... Who did this anyway? Oh, sorry. My phone is being annoying. I was trying to decide to figure out who did that art, but it's a Pinterest. It's a pinned on Pinterest. Oh, Duang Si. So a Chinese, it looks like a Chinese artist, maybe? I don't know, but I like it. It's very good. So if he ever watches this stream, be aware. Be aware, see? I like your Wyvern. I was already thinking, yeah, Harumph, I was already thinking about doing pale belly. Because it's a natural thing on animals, especially birds, often. Unless it's like a colored stomach on some birds. But often the belly is lighter with flying animals and terrestrial animals. So I was already going to do that. It was just like finding, kind of just like wanting some color inspiration along the other lines. So what I'll probably do is I won't go quite as bright, although I think I'll probably use Mahogany Brown as the red. And then we'll grab some orange, maybe some orange brown with some sunlight orange for highlights, or fire orange, maybe fire orange for highlights. We'll do that. Alrighty. So my putty is getting old, and it's like, grrr, grrr. It doesn't want to come off its little strip. So let's see here. But because it's getting old is precisely why I need to use it. So a large piece of yellow. And a little piece of blue. Bloop. Maybe a little bit more blue. Bloop. So it's about a 2-to-1. 2-to-1 green to yellow. It's about right. I'll stick it back in its plastic. Yeah, but that's the same with terrestrial animals, though, right? Twisted Oma. I mean, a lot of dog patterns are that way. A lot of lizard patterns are that way. A lot of, you know, there's all sorts of animals, birds and fish and everything. It's just a natural coloration that you tend to see. And usually on AD New Dragons, usually they're going to have a tan or a beige or a off-white belly to go with their colorful top. So it stands to figure that wyverns would be the same. Oh, interesting. This wyvern can be posed clutching a wall. Just saying. Cool. Yep, we're wyverning today, Cookie. We were just sharing the... I was just glancing at some wyvern concept art, and there was one I really liked, so we're going to use that for our model. Going forward. I don't know if anybody's gonna be hiding a big gigantic dragon thing. But I could totally see, you know, a pale underbelly for when they're flying to make them less visible. And the brown, reddish brown coloration or darker coloration against, like, you know, the earth makes it harder to pick them out. Albino wyverns would probably be eaten pretty quickly. Could see them against the foliage of the earth too easily. Oh, Ferrara, this is green stuff. I mean, this is the traditional medium used to sculpt miniatures for decades. It's plumber's putty, but a long time ago, sculptors with, I think with Raoul Partha, right, Julie? Or was it even earlier? But Tom Meyer, doesn't Tom Meyer claim to have discovered green stuff? One of the really, really, like, sculptors from long ago discovered that this stuff was really ideal if you put a wire armature under it for sculpting miniatures. Because the thing about the plumber's putty is that it'll stand up to vulcanization, which is the process of mold making, where they heat the mold up to over 600 degrees. And so a lot of putties and sculpting mediums don't hold up to that process very well, but green will come through it if it has a good armature under it. So green stuff was first used to sculpt models, and then just in the last like 5 to 10 years, you've seen this boom in 3D sculpting with ZBrush. But that before that, because 3D printing had finally gotten, you know, good enough. But before that point, everything was done with green, or the big models were sometimes done with Fimo, the oven-baked clay. They're all Partha. Okay. So yeah, Ferrara, this is what that is. And nowadays, even though the number of sculptors using it to sculpt models is getting fewer, because a lot of new sculptors are getting in, they're going straight to 3D, it's still very useful to keep on hand because it's good for gap filling and for detail sculpting. So when you want to do a conversion or you want to do something to fill in a gap, green stuff is really, really useful because you can use it also to sculpt the texture if you're filling a gap that would have like scale texture or whatever. And green users in our chat here, you can see it is named, their call name is named after the green stuff here, the green putty, because Bob and Julie Guthrie and Bob Rodolphe are that ID, that is them, and there are some of the sculptors for Reaper that still use green primarily, or green mixed with other putties like Fimo for the big stuff. Julie sculpts a lot of our dragons. Big Apple, thank you for the resub. Tier 1 in 9 months. Awesome. You only have a few months to your sub-anniversary. Oh, Julie could school me on the science lessons for green. So yeah, so the thing about it is that it comes as blue and yellow, and then you mix it in various proportions depending on what you want to do. So for me, since I want a gap fill, I went with more yellow than blue, but you don't want to go with too little of one or the other. You need a certain proportion. So I do 2-to-1, which I believe Julie and Bob are the ones who turned me on to that. If you want to smooth the green into the surrounding area, you want more yellow, because it'll stretch out better. Yeah, so Reaper sells this, the Sculpting Putty Ferrara. They'll sell it in a strip, just like I've got here, except a little bit longer, I think. It actually is like folded several times, but you use so little each time. To keep it good, keep it in your freezer, because it is a cure putty, so you mix it, which means that along this line where these two touch, it is curing. So that's why I've left the spine of it here, and I'm plucking putty off of either side, because it'll get like clumps and chunks in it, which if you're like making a base isn't a big deal, but if you're trying to like smoothly fill in gaps is a big deal. So if you keep it in the freezer, that process is slowed, and so it lasts a lot longer. So David and I currently have a big tube and several chunks in our freezer. It's 3 to 4 is better. Now I know. Well, then I've gone too yellow, but I've gotten accustomed to using this particular, this particular proportion. But yeah, all right. I will make a note that I should use 3 to 4 instead. All right, we have Pegged Together Wyvern. And the Wyvern pegs together pretty nice, but it does leave those seam lines. So we're gonna put... Yeah, the one leg fits a little bit better, but you can see the gap at the waist here. And, if you're just doing the Wyvern, like if you're doing a pack of them for your gaming table, then you maybe don't mind that because it's underneath, right? So a lot of people might not see it. Yeah, I can see where you could pose this guy on a wall, right? Like clinging to a wall, like an outcropping, and trying to bite down at the adventurers below him or her. So up here, you don't so much need the putty. Here, let me get in focus. Let me get close up. So up here, you may not need to putty on this. Oh, sorry, get the butt. But because there's a ridge of heavier scales up here, you probably could get away with just, lining around the scales, and you might not need to putty up here if you didn't want to. But down here, like if you're posing your dragon where you might see this, then you want to. No, I normally don't assemble Durham, or I should say I partially assemble. Okay. That's good to know, Bob and Julie. 4 yellow to 3 blue. Grumble Drum, I'm betting. Less blue for detail, slightly more blue for strength. Got it. There's the pros. So Durham, okay. I'm putting this together only because I can still reach everything. Normally, when I do a miniature, I only assemble as much as I absolutely can do without blocking other detail. I really am a believer in the paint before assemble in many, many cases. So, for example, I'm not going to put this on because if I put the base on, I won't be able to reach anything down here. So, this Wyvern is sculpted so that I can hold the tail and paint it from any angle pretty much without a problem. So I'm going to assemble this model and then paint it. However, in many cases, I do not do that. You remember the Sphinx, maybe, where she wasn't stuck to her base and her wings were not attached, because it is much harder to paint those things, I believe, when you have them already attached on the model, especially wings, especially if you're going to do detail. This is an exception because, there's all sorts of different putties, Cookie. I just like the green stuff because I'm used to it now. This is an exception as far as the attached wings. Obviously, the wings are already attached and there's nothing I can do about it. But the nice thing about this is it's very flat. So it's very easy for me to hold it like this and get in and do detail on the wings. That is not the case in a lot of dragons and winged things in general. But this one I can put down flat and pretty much have a good pose, a relaxing pose to paint it with. But when they have wings that are kind of coming up and out, then it gets really dicey, especially if the model is heavy. You can really have some rub off and just some not pleasant experiences. So yeah, so my bottom line is, can you attach it and still paint it comfortably? and still reach everywhere without frustration and do all of the cool stuff that you want to do without, like, you know, having a real hard time of it. If you can, attach everything you can. Does that make sense? You could do whatever putty you wanted. David has like a wood putty. He uses green for a lot though. The thing is that you can use a lot of different things for gap filling, but if you're trying to sculpt detail at the same time, I'm going to put a little more blue in here. I'm going to listen to my Bob and Julie Oracle and add a little bit more blue while we're talking. But yeah, so if I'm trying to not only fill these gaps, but also sculpt in some of the scale detail, for example, then I go for green stuff. Because I also like Abe's Epoxy Sculpt for filling, but it's not as nearly as good a sculpting medium. Like, it's really not. Really, really not. So if you are, if you're trying to sculpt a detail, if you're trying to add a belt pouch onto a model, or if you're trying to add a scabbard, or if you're trying to add scale texture or feather texture where you're filling a gap, green stuff, I think, is a better tool for that, because it's as Bob and Julie point out, it holds detail. It's meant for this. It is a little harder to learn to use because it is sticky, but that is what sticks it to the model very well. All right, now I've got more blue in there. I feel a little bit more confident. I'm going to get out Tiny Spoon, and what else do we want to use today? What other awesome sculpting tool would we like to use? Maybe Tiny Spade. Little Spade is pretty good too, although he might be too big for this. No, he's pretty good, actually. I think he's going to be pretty good. How about, actually, what we really want is a nice clay shaper. Let me get out my happy clay shapers of various sorts. This is the taper point. That's right. I like the rounded one a lot, but I'm also going to get my chisel point out. So these are clay shapers. They're silicone. Always, in my opinion, the extra firm is what you're going at. The clay shaper is the actual brand, and you can buy sets of them that come with different shapes. But I like the black ones, the extra firm. I find the other ones are too soft for what I tend to use them for. The other tool that might be useful for this is like the little like reverse spoony thing. And these are just repurposed dental tools. You'll see these used very commonly as sculpting tools. They come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. Where did my Wax 5 mutated Wax 5 go? No, that's not it. Apparently it's hiding. No Wax 5 for me. Some of my sculpting tools appear to have like rampaged off somewhere. Oh well. No love for you, sculpting tools. You didn't stick around. I think we'll use those. Ah! That's the problem with my drawer here, is it does get filled with stuff. Get in there. There. Awesome. But yeah, so they work really well. Is there a technique that I was surprised that I learned? I'm trying to think. I never used to believe I would like get good at green stuff, because this stuff definitely has a learning curve, and I was terrible at it when I started. But as far as painting techniques, probably the one that surprised me most isn't that I used it, but that I've come to depend on it so much for Aura, is wet blending. So putting down one color and then smooshing another color into it while it's wet. I do a ton of spot wet blending now on my models, just little tiny blends here and there. And when I first learned wet blending, a lot of people were only using it for big areas. And I've found that I get pretty good mileage using it for smaller areas now. And it surprised me how much I had come to depend on it. I even wet blend with glazes, especially. Like, I do that, which is a weird kind of technique thing. Glazes are really, really thin paint. So most people use, like, like Marika Reimer, who's a very, very well-known mini painter. She uses wet blending to set up a lot of her surfaces, and then she goes to layering to refine them. So a lot of people will use that technique with thick paint. Let me get my glasses on. And they'll smoosh the colors together. But I used a lot with really thin paint, actually. Oh, we've got mold lines. We've got all that stuff, too. Well, maybe I should do that. Get away. Hold on, little green stuff. Hold that thought. But I just noticed these mold lines on his legs, and they're going to annoy me. Happily, it is easy to take them off with my little knife. But yeah, wet blending is great. I always told people what I tend to, actually, I'm going to take this apart and just do it. What I tell people is that wet blending is not an essential technique, because I find that some people take to it really, really fast and easily, and some people have a lot of problem with it, especially if you're in a very arid environment with not a lot of humidity and you don't have a dehumidifier, or you're running the AC a lot, which is going to counteract a dehumidifier, or a humidifier, not a dehumidifier. But AC is going to, suck the moisture out of the air also. So if you're in a very dry or hot climate, wet blending can be very frustrating to try to use. So I always tell people it's not a necessary technique, but it's very useful. So you don't need it, but but I always encourage people to learn how to do it. But yeah, I've seen so many people as I've taught, like there are many people who just gave up on wet blending, like threw their arms up in frustration and went, no. And then there was I once taught an 11-year-old kid. I was coaching him. He went on to win a Youth Golden Demon. His parents were so proud. But I taught him wet blending, and he took to it like duck to water. Like that's how he won his demon, is he wet blended his Space Marine dude. And GW put him up. So yeah, some people I find just really take to wet blending, really enjoy it, really like it, really, really find it easy. Oh. Yeah, that's why I said, mini painter, what do you do that is weird? Wet blending with glazes? Yeah, I don't see many people do it. Or, you know what's a lot more likely? Mini painter? Yeah, what's a lot more likely is that a crap ton of people do it, but they haven't analyzed themselves enough to notice it. Like, I analyze my style a lot. Like, I try to break down how I get the results that I do, because I teach so much, right? So I even hadn't noticed until I stopped to really break it down in one of my videos. I was like, okay, how am I getting these effects specifically? And when I looked at what I was doing, I was like, well, holy hot crap. I was, wet blending with glazes. And I bet a lot of painters do, and I bet they just don't think about it. They just do it. Like, this is something I've encountered in painter friends who don't teach a lot, is that they just do it. They don't think about how they get the effects that they get. Which is not a bad thing. If they're never teaching, then they don't have to. But for those of us who teach, I think that we tend to notice, or we try to dissect really what we're doing for people. Just getting some of these mold lines cleared off. But yeah, I do a lot of underpainting also, just like traditional oil paints. So dark and light underpainting. Now, I don't like Zenith Prime very much, but I find that I use it for establishing textures, weathering, highlights sometimes. Like, I've gotten to the point where I'm using a lot of underpainting in the course of my work. And by underpainting, I mean you're putting down a white or an off-white in a texture pattern or place, and then you're like glazing or lightweight painting over it to use it to establish like an effect. So that's another thing that I was surprised I took up. But remember though that I have traditional art training. Like, I went to art school. So a lot of these techniques were things that I knew about and had used, just had not used in the context of miniatures. Like the underpainting thing. Because I loved oils when I was a kid. Until I decided I never wanted to smell turpentine again. So really, wherever there's a big bad mold line, I'm going to try to take it down with my knife mostly, and then I'll go in with a file to smooth it out a little bit. But I'm impatient when it comes to a big bad mold line. I just want to get it done, get it gone. So the knife is the fastest way to get it gone if you have good control. Let me grab my file. Where's my... Oh, I have it out from yesterday. There it is. Yeah, yo, Beth, right. Yeah, with improvement, I never dissected nearly as much. Like, when I improve, my strategy for improving Mini Painter is more all right, I'm going to tackle this technique that I don't know, and I'm going to deconstruct it, and then I'm going to go for it, right? So there is some deconstruction in there, to a point, because I'm trying to learn something new. But I think I actually had a lot more wow and elucidation moments because of teaching. Because at that point, when you're trying to learn a new technique and you already are a decent painter, you can tackle it from the mindset of what you already know. Whereas when you teach, especially if you're teaching like a class that's an entry-level class to a certain technique, you have to teach it not for people who already know, people who don't know at all. And I think that's where some of the most valuable insight comes, is looking at it from a beginner perspective and saying how to explain this or make this accessible and teach it in such a way that people can have some success with it and be encouraged, right? Like that's the goal. That's the holy grail, is that if you take my layering and glazing class, you come out of it understanding and having had some success with blending better. And it didn't take too long. And so you come out of that experience with confidence, and that leads you to make changes in the way you paint and be happier with the way you paint. Hopefully. That's the best case, the best result scenario. Little bit of smoothing here with the file on the wyvern leg. Paint whiffling thing. Oh, it's an oil painting technique, right, Kerniko? That's what oil painters do. They do layer on stuff as well after like their first coat has laid down for a bit, but often it's blending. And that's how you can overwork an area in oil painting very easily. You can turn it to mud if you aren't conscious of what you're blending. Wet blending in acrylics is a lot harder, but totally doable. I mean, the paint isn't staying wet forever, so you have to kind of like learn to do it faster than the oil painters have to. But it is an extremely useful technique. Like I said, I use it a ton. It's very useful for speed. Gives you good results. It can give you good results, a starting blend to then, as Marika uses it, to then refine and make better. I think a lot of wet palette painters end up using it here and there, because it is an easy way to get blends if you're working with a little bit of thicker paint on a wet palette. I found I had to depend on it pretty heavily when I switched to wet palette to get better at my wet palette. All right, we just got to get a little bit. This is where having this really tiny diamond file is nice, is it can get its little nose in between these claws and take some of this texture off. That claw is definitely very, very stubborn, though. There we go. Sometimes they're a little stubborn. Oh, this year's classes? Well, I mean, everybody wants me to teach the color theory class. Everybody wants Anne to teach color theory and pigments. Like, that's... I don't even have to ask you guys to know that. That said, I put that list up on the wall. David will probably teach his OSL class, which you should take. Unquestionably. Absolutely. He and I, though, we were thinking that we may only teach a couple of classes. I don't know if they're going to put us on Artist Alley this year, because we may go more to hang out with people and be sociable and, you know, just enjoy being back at a con after, 2 years? I'm just going to get the edges of these wings real quick with a real quick scrape with the knife to take stuff off if there is anything. There isn't a whole lot. This is a pretty good mold. Pretty smooth. Yeah, it looks good. Got a little bit of threads there. There we go. When you do get, if you are using a knife and you do get some threads like this, if you've been going one direction, just go back in the opposite direction, and usually that's enough to clear up your threads. Oh, that's so basic, Mini Painter. I did that before I had all of the pigment information that I have now. Like, I know so much more about paint chemistry. Like, that 20-minute color theory in 20 minutes, I mean, it still is a great base guide. Like, with the helper colors and everything, I still do that. I still utilize that. But now, in addition, I've developed kind of a system to teach it better with the color wheel. I used to throw the color wheel away before I even started. But over time, I've realized that if you don't, like, if you're totally a noob and you haven't done any art at all, or you don't have a good natural grasp of color, and a lot of people think they don't. I think a lot of people are better at color than they think, if they listen to their gut. But the color wheel is useful to teach some concepts, so I have embraced the color wheel, especially the black-white scale and some other stuff, because it's just an easier way to get people to understand what colors go together. Although you can just do it in your head. Like, you don't need... It's the same thing as, like, the farther apart on the color wheel, the more the colors like each other. And the closer they are, the less they like each other. But it's just... there's a lot more to it. I think that people's biggest problem with finding good colors for a model is often just, one, they don't know how to deal with muted colors. Like they see a muted color, and because it's not on the color wheel particularly, you know, it can baffle them as to what goes with it. When really you just use the same rules, you just apply that quote-unquote muted filter. And then the other thing that baffles people is just where to start, which is something that I cannot help you do. You must make the choice of what your main color is, like, or what a color is. You must start with a color. You have to make that choice. Nobody else can make it for you. I mean, you can look online for concept art to copy, and that's how you get your first color. Or you can just choose a color you've been wanting to use for a long time. But once you have that first color, you can work off everything else. Everything else can be worked around that color. All right, I think we're good. Let me take a look at his face, but I think his face is pretty good. Yeah, he has a tiny little bit of mold line on his snout. It happens. Sorry, dentistry here, or nose work. We're giving him a nose job. There we go. Him or her. There we are. All right, so not too much cleanup on this dragon, or sorry, wyvern. Not too bad. Just little bits. Not nearly, like, the bones, I think, have gotten quite good these days as far as minimizing mold lines. Everything goes with purple? Almost. Almost everything goes with purple. Yeah. Monochrome painting is just like if you want monochrome painting, you just have to think about, like, zenith lighting. Like, I mean, I think Derek used to do a monochrome painting class. Hey, Major. But I mean, the basics of monochrome painting, in my opinion, to start with, you should do a map like this. You should do a black and white map, just like the upper part of this figure. You can base it off Zenith priming if you want, but the big thing is that you need drama. You need a lot of very dark and you need a lot of very light. I think that Derek stopped teaching monochrome because it is so very simple after a point. Like, the biggest thing is maybe, you know, like what colors do you use for like sepia if you want to do a sepia tone like Western piece. But that also is very easy to talk about. I don't think that monochrome is really a 2-hour class. Now, if you combine it with tuning Zenith, like that model I just showed where I Zenith primed it and then I went in and I tuned that. Sorry, I have another string I need to get rid of. A little bit of mold line here. Boop. We're puttying a new model today, Ursa. Yeah, they do have mold lines in the weirdest places sometimes, you're right. Alright, I think I've gotten all my little threads off of these guys. Think we're good. A little bit of file if I need some. Yeah, alright. Now I'm ready. Hopefully my green is still bad. It's still good. That was my problem for mixing up my green before I checked for mold lines. I totally forgot. Alright, so first we're going to glue this guy together. And he fits pretty well, so I'm going to use my Zap-A-Gap. For models that do not fit well or have big gaps, I tend to use Loctite Ultra Gel. These are the two super glues that I go back and forth between. I find that between them, they can pretty much meet any challenge. So I'm just going to put a big blob of glue in here. There's probably a bit of a glob in there, but it should be okay. There. Sit, stay. Zap-A-Gap Green Label is kind of it's not a super thin glue. It's actually a gap filler, so it's medium. It's medium viscosity. So it's not a gel and it's not a super thin. I don't like super thin glues at all for miniatures because so few miniatures fit absolutely flush. All right, so if you have extra glue, just be gentle about it, but you can totally take a Kleenex and kind of like slurp it away. Just do it real quick. You don't want to have the Kleenex bond to the area, obviously. But I often do this if I've put a dab of glue in somewhere and then when I squish the parts together, I see a lot of glue come out. I will just grab a Kleenex and like make a little pointed tip and gently dab it away. And that will keep me from having this big glob of glue that might catch my paintbrush by not drying very well or very quickly. So that's good. Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right. Yes, I'm not ejecting people today. Justin might. John might. I won't. Mostly because I'm busy. Alrighty. Little snake of green. Go down there. There we go. Good enough. Let's get our clay shaper out. And I always use water on my tools. Be careful that you don't start out with a crap ton of water on your tool though, because then you can get a giant puddle under your green, which will keep it from sticking to stuff. Not exactly a good idea. So we'll use our clay shaper to just maneuver our thin thread of green stuff into place very gently. And as I said, where you've got areas like here where we have a thorny surface going up against a different thorny surface, you don't even have to fill this area. Like once the glue sets, once you prime it or once you paint over it, you won't even notice. So there's definitely limits to how much I do as far as green. There are some areas that I find just don't require it. Let's do Tiny Spoon. Tiny Spoon, where are you? the tiny spoon. Hey, Dragon Eye. You got free of meetings? That's always a good feeling. So let's get some of this stuff pulled in here. And the other thing I can do is if I have excess here where I don't really need all of this gigantic green stuff in that area, I can relocate it. To come up. Eek. Because green always looks like, you know, you're always afraid you don't have enough, and then you realize you always have too much. So usually when you start with a snake of green stuff like that, you can actually make it stretch a lot wider, a lot more than you think. So we're using Tiny Spoon just to kind of press down here. Tiny Spoon is just a brass rod that's been hit with a hammer and shaped with a bit of diamond filer sandpaper, just to be a spoon. It's very flat. It's a little bit concave. Tiny Spoon is very useful because it's tiny, like miniatures. So it's good for doing this sort of stuff. Ah, okay. There we go. Listen to Derek. Studio DKS is Derek Schubert, who used to teach monochrome. Yeah, I remember the demand for it just going down too, Derek, and I think it makes sense to make it a generic, like more of a general purpose contrast class. Because you're right, as I was just saying with the Zenith, what you really need to do if you're going to paint monochrome is you need that high contrast, right? You need to have your almost blacks, and you got to have your almost whites, and you know, it's what's going to give you a successful monochrome paint job. So it makes sense to combine it either with a tuning Zenith priming class or with a basic class on contrast and how important it is. That's totally makes perfect sense to me. I'm going to scrape off some of my excess green and repurpose it down here. Ah, there we go. And I'm going to smear this green a little bit further just to fill that crack. The Zenith highlighting, the black and white underpainting helps in shading and highlighting. Yeah, that's actually if you're on, I don't know if you're on my Patreon or not, Durham, but I just did a video about tuning Zenithal and then painting over it, and I used that model that I just showed you. And the point is that if you're learning where to put your highlights and shadows, doing that Zenith and then tuning it is a really nice way to start, because then you're just paint by numbering. Like at that point, you're just painting your darks where the black is, you're painting your lights where the white is, and you're putting your middle base colors in between, and it's a good guide, right? It also, in the course of you learning to tune the Zenith, and by tuning, I mean Zenith priming is not just good out the gate. You often have to change it just a little to make it look better. But in the course of learning to do that, you automatically learn better where your highlights and shadows go. It's just a process that's all integrated. Oh, okay. Yeah, Patreon is kind of like it's crowdfunding, but a subscription service. So essentially, it's what lets a lot of us do just freelance painting these days, because it allows us to get a steady paycheck. So yeah, Patreon is you can look and support creators. A lot of webcomic artists are on there now, so that they can actually get paid for the work that they do. A lot of miniature painters are on there with a lot of great video and PDF tutorials. It's a really cool, I mean, it's not free like YouTube. It's essentially, support your local artist. I think it's pretty cool. Having tried to freelance without Patreon and with Patreon, I can tell you that it was very not workable without Patreon for me. And with Patreon, I can actually do it. I'm the kind of person who needs to be able to budget during my month, and Patreon lets me do that. So I'm just tapping with I'm kind of patting the green down. At this point, I'm not actually sculpting. Yeah. Yeah, mine is pretty cheap at the base level, Durham. Like $2. I kept it that way so that like poor college student friends of mine could actually subscribe. But yeah, and it's got several levels depending on how much content you want and what types of content. But yeah, there's a lot more brilliant people than me on Patreon as well. So, you know, there's all sorts of choices. So do look into it once you feel like you can. I do highly recommend it. All right, so tapping it up around there, smooshing it just flat. A lot of digital sculptors doing Patreon now, yeah. And I mean, and the reason that we do it is that, you know, before, the ways to get paid were very inefficient, right? We would do all this work and then we would not get paid very much. And so if you want to do it full time, it wasn't workable. Like becoming a YouTube star, it takes, you know, a lot of hard work, and it doesn't pay off very fast or very easily. And sometimes it never quite gets to the point where it could sustain you at all. Whereas Patreon gives a lot more of a higher percentage to the artist. So you are able to sustain yourself. There's a lot of excellent people doing content for Patreon. All right, there we go. So now I'm patting this down and smoothing it in. So I'm using Tiny Spoon, although I could use, since Tiny Spoon is not available to everybody, I could use the little rounded spoon off of one of these dental picks as well. It's probably small enough to do this, to kind of pat. You're just trying to pat the green stuff down. And then you can kind of press it and smooth it. And I'm just putting a very light pressure on it to kind of pull out the edges into the surrounding sculpt. And if your putty is pliable enough, if it doesn't, or if you get a little bit of water, you're going to get this little bit of green is pulling up and not smoothing out very well. So I'll pull that off. But chances are I can still work with the rest of this. Always make sure if you're using a metal tool that you want a fair bit of water. That's why I like to smush this down initially with the silicone tools, because they don't need as much water, so there's less of a chance of water getting underneath your green. If you want to call it that, I just like, I don't have a term for it. I'm not a sculptor, so I'm just a mess around with sculpting putty to do minor conversions or fill stuff. I suppose it is very similar to the feathering brushstroke in painting, though. And the fresher your green is, like the sooner after you mix it that you do this, the better effect you're going to get generally, since the green will start to set up fairly quickly. And once it starts to set up, it gets a lot harder to smooth it into surrounding areas. Hello, Hobby Goblin Joe. Thanks for the raid. Cookie, it depends on the temperature. In a very warm environment, green will start to set up super fast. I would say it starts to set up about 20 minutes in. Do you think so, Julie? And straight up green. Again, it also depends on the amount of blue versus yellow in the putty. So it really isn't, it depends. But in general, I think after an hour, you're well along the curing path, and it starts to set up 20 to 30 minutes, I want to say. But yeah, it really varies. The green to yellow mix, whether you're mixing other putties into it, the ambient temperature, where you're at. Putty! Yep, we're puttying, Reaper John. You are correct. You bring new people. Yay! Hi, new people. I'm Ann. I work for Reaper. I've worked for Reaper. Actually, I just celebrated my 18-year anniversary of working for Reaper, which is crazy talk. I was their staff painter. I created the Reaper paint line, Reaper Master Series paint. And now I do content for them. I do the morning show every day. We're here from 11:30 a.m. Central USA time onward till around 1. And today we are puttying in a Wyvern after we have glued it together, because I don't want that that crease. I don't mind so much if I've got that join line up here where a plate is overlapping another, because that's just going to be natural. I can shade that in. I'm going to be lining that probably anyway. But around the belly here, I definitely want the skin to be smooth. So yeah, we're giving it a bikini. Almost. Hey, AKT, thank you. Thank you for the resub on the Prime. 4-month streak. Thanks, Grumble. Yeah, it's, if you would have asked me when I was younger if I ever would work for a company for like almost 20 years, I would have been like, I don't think so. It would have to be a really cool company. Yes. And be careful when using what Valandar is talking about, a cooker. Be careful when using it if you've got a lot of heat in there, because you can blister green if it gets too close and too hot. That's why I just normally just let it cure naturally. It depends on how impatient you are to start getting painting. So, yeah. And now I still have an edge over here that I need to deal with, and I need to smooth the texture out of this. I'm going to put a lot of water in at this point. I can put a huge puddle of water onto here if I want to at this point, because I have I've spread the green and flattened it down, so the water isn't going to get underneath my work. And now I'm going to be looking at it pretty critically in the light to make sure that I don't have any tool marks. And this is where the clay shaper comes in again, where I can roll it over the surface to really smooth it out. To really see how smooth that is now. I love this tool for this application. When I discovered that I could do this, it was like a huge breakthrough for me. That rolling the round tool, the taper point, clay shaper, taper point, size 0, extra firm. Rolling it back and forth over the area would make it so smooth. That was a huge thing. I was so happy when I found that out. It really, when you're working with one of those bigger, older metal models, like, and you're trying to putty like 2 halves of a horse together, this is such a useful technique. And rolling it back and forth, and that's going to smooth out. It's going to make everything really nice and smooth. So we started with clay shaper to get the putty kind of tamped down. We moved to metal tools, either brass or steel, to flatten down the putty and smooth it in. And then we're working back to our clay shaper to get a really nice, to wipe the tool marks out of our surface. So that's the way that I've learned to do it, which is nice. And if you find an area that you still need to kind of work with, like over here, then I can take my little metal tool. Another thing you can use is micro knitting needles for this, if you can find one. And you could probably take a ball peen hammer to them and hammer them flatter, depending on what they're made out of. But there are tiny little knitting needles that can be used as sculpting tools as well. You need to email Reaper. Pewter Black Dragon. Totally set up in an hour. Thank you, Bob and Julie. So green will be completely set in an hour. So you need to work it. Work it early. Get it where you want it pretty fast. Which is why, if correct me if I'm wrong, Derek and Bob and Julie, but why sculptors tend to work in like small areas of a figure at a time. Like, because you do it until you have to kind of put it aside, and then you switch and you work on a different figure for a while that one finishes curing. And you don't want to start a big, huge area all at once, because if you don't get it tooled in time, if you don't get it sculpted in time, then your green is going to start to set up. So when you are working with green, keep that in mind. Flattening out. So much fun. Roll, roll, roll. I do love my my clay shaper. There we go. I think we're good, guys. We've got it all puttied up. Need to get this smooshed in a little bit up here. And then we're pretty much good to go, I think. There. That seems nice and smooth. Like when I look at it in the light, my tool marks are minimized. Ah, okay. Heated up in a heater, 1 hour, 2 hours normal. Okay. Yep, what Derek says. He's a master of underpainting. Yep. Yeah, 10-step, or actually what I find, Derek, and it depends on how thick your paint is, Dogfather. If you like to work with slightly thinner paint, I find that you can go up in 1.5 steps on the grayscale. So have your black, have your white, but then you could go to an 8.5, and then a 7, and then a 5.5, and then a 4, and then, you know, maybe a 2, maybe a 3, 2, 1. You might get, as you get closer to light, you may want to throw some extra in there, or you may just want to go 2, 1. But I find that, especially with darker colors, you can go with those 1.5 steps instead of just 1 step. So you don't need 10 colors open on your palette, but 7 are useful. Especially if you're just starting out with the underpainting. But yeah, if you use thicker paint, then maybe you want a few more steps. Hello, Jarrett's Terrain Minis. How's it going? We just finished puttying our Wyvern, which is our brand new project. Julie sculpted him or her. And we're about to start painting, I think. Yeah, it's stretch break time, actually. So what I'm going to do, guys, is since it's stretch break time, I'm going to go get up and wash my hands because I hate the feel of green. This is funny because, like, David was like, I don't have any, you know, he never feels anything when he's doing green work. Like, he doesn't feel it on his hands afterward. But he has, like, hands that have more natural oils than mine do. Mine, I just have really dry hands. So the putty residue sticks to my hands, and it's just, like, drives me nuts. It's like having sticky fingers when you're trying to use your utensils at the dinner table, and you're just like, argh! So, all right. So we're going to leave Mr. Wyvern to go rar at you all. Rar. And we're going to leave his card here. And I'm going to go wash my hands and do my stretches. Yeah, isn't it the worst? Absolutely. All right. Yep. No, it's a stretch break time. It totally is. It's a stretch break, and Anne goes to wash her hands because green residue is all over them. So I will be right back, all. And then we will resume. We'll probably start figuring out colors. Alrighty. Quick stretch. So everybody, if you haven't been stretching, stretch please. Hey Max Style, how's it going? Hey, you have a funny colored emote thing, Pendrake? No. He's posed this way, original, because Julie said that she posed him this way so you could have him clinging to like a wall or something like that. Or if you have him clinging to a wall, like he's hanging off of the wall surface, he would be biting down at the adventurer. And he's close enough. To me, it looks like he's actually like warning off some other creature that's flying over his territory. Or her. Rawr. 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 But you could also like mount the wyvern on a wall. Or on a surface more like this. So you could build him a rock clump that he was like sitting on, and then he would be like reaching down to get somebody. Yep. Yep. Julie said this was on purpose. Stretching. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, sometimes people use Vaseline for the green stuff. Do remember that if you do, you need to wash the figure thoroughly before you paint it. That's why I tend not to use it. Why I tend to use just water, so I don't want to have to go and wash the model and try to get all that Vaseline gookiness off. Yeah, we all forget our own advice there, Derek. Don't try to be a perfectionist, just try to learn. Yeah. We all tell ourselves that, and then we all, like, grumble at ourselves when we don't get it right away, right? Just gonna do a little bit of cat-cow, and then once my spine is limbered up, we shall return. There we go. Alrighty, so let's go back to our reference photo that we found that we really liked for our wyvern. I'm going to knock over my camera and a bunch of other stuff. No, it's not to forget to be perfect, Pendrake. Is to forget to try to be perfect. We all like to be perfect. Let's face it, I love it when David tells me I'm perfect. But however, it is, we demand perfection of ourselves too much. Let yourself mess up. As long as you're learning, it's all good. But yeah. Bye, Scrying Eye. It was good to see you. You should bring it to ReaperCon anyway, Dogfather, especially if it doesn't work, because then you can talk to us in person and say, I tried this. What am I doing wrong? Even if, I don't know, Derek, are you thinking you'll come to ReaperCon this year? Are you ReaperConning with us? Or have you not decided yet? David and I have a room, but we haven't, we're just still waiting to see how everything looks. But hopefully, ReaperCon can be a thing. But yeah, if Derek comes, Dogfather, you could totally, just say, hey, I tried this to help me, make it better. I always think, if I can make it work, I'll bring it to ReaperCon. No, it's the things that aren't working that you should bring to ReaperCon, because then we can help you make them work. Because we love that. We love troubleshooting your miniatures, Dogfather, and everyone. This is something I love to do. Let's see, where is my 9070? There it is. Color that I had out of my drawer for a long time and brought it back. I'm glad I did. Probably not, Crows. I tend not to be a GM at cons just because of the randomness of the player base. I tried it once. I ran a werewolf game and it was okay, but it wasn't as much fun as running for friends. So I just never went back into it. Plus, let's face it, at the con, I'm really super busy with everything else. So, this is the wyvern that we chose. So, a very, very different take on the wyvern. Good. Yay, Bob and Julie are going to come. Yay. Yay. I need my Bob and Julie, like, dose. So we're looking at a creamy color here, but it is a little bit faded out. You can see how they're doing kind of a little bit of reflected color from the environment, but in general, we're working with kind of a neutral cream here. Yeah, I'm not going to do it fiery. I'm not going to do it like this bright orange. I think that's more like supposed to be simulated sunlight. Pendrake, because there's so much light on the ground here. Because there's definitely some clouds, but there's some sunlit areas as well. So I don't want to go that bright, but this is in general the color scheme I want to try. So I think for the underbelly area there, maybe I'll go sand and use a gray instead. It's always helpful when you have a color. I mean, you could put this in the power palette too that Reaper just brought back. Yeah, this is better. It's a little bit more gray, but then down here it gets pretty darn saturated. Like I think down here on the tail, I could get away with this and with bleached linen. I think so. Because I want to go a little warmer. There's gray shadows here because gray is a natural shadow. So you will often see it. So that, and then there's that black with the kind of sky highlight, which comes out as a blue black. Almost. Maybe that's why I like it, Cornico. But yeah, I'm not going to go that bright though. Not that saturated. But we will go fire. Maybe orange brown. Maybe a set like that. This triad. And then for that, I actually think maybe I use this color a lot, guys. Wolf gray, that triad. So our whites triad is going to actually be kind of like this. Although actually, didn't I say Osirian sand? Yeah, let's do that instead. I love Osirian sand. Where is it? I have it over here somewhere. I hope I didn't. Oh, I gave it to David. Dang it. Don't you hate it when you give your boyfriend a color and then it goes to live on his table forever, and then you have to go and search for it, and it's the only bottle you have. Aha! He has discarded it carelessly. Better. Yeah, like that. Rarg. Yes. Anything it wants to say. Basic sculpting details and advanced sculpting armor, but that's open to change. Cool, cool, Bob and Julie. So no Shadow Raven. Yes, okay. Well, when your child or your cat or your everybody else steals the model. All right, so Osirian sand. I really like this color. I think I'll probably be doing some mixes. Some mixes between this will probably get me close to that kind of duality here. You can see where they've got a very yellow color, but they also have very gray colors mixed in. And they've also got some lovely color reflection. Notice this? The orange from the leg that's being like reflected on the white is very nice. So that's a very cool thing. So I think that I'm going to do this, and I may end up adding in just a little bit of russet brown to warm up that wolf gray. Maybe. So you would get, the thing about using the power palette, I don't know, John, do you know if the Pathfinder paints are in the power palette yet? But I'm pretty darn sure though that as far as that color goes, bleached linen is your baby. And then, so that's going to be pure black, but we're probably going to use blue liner plus white for the highlights. But I think we will use, this is definitely like a blue black or a, looks like almost purplish shadows as well on some of this red. So then if we're going to do that, then we want to grab something like Kraken Ink. So then our triad turns into a quadrad. And I may just decide to go up mixing these two and not use the orange brown, but I do really like orange brown. I think it's a color a lot of people underestimate. It is quite vibrant. It's really not as muted as it looks. And then I may end up adding just white to my fire and mixing in a little bit of this to make a transition. Yeah, bleached linen. Yep. Well, it's good that nobody steals your paint, Durham. I am not in that world anymore. To be fair, I threw that paint at him because he was working on a model and he's like, this is not the right color, or this is not the right off-white. And I'm like, oh, you want Osirian sand? And I give it to him. So I just forgot to take it back. So I won't totally throw David under the bus. It's me too. So when we've added that in, we could also, because we can see that the red purple's out a bit. See that purple hue? So we could even work that purple hue down here before, as we transition to the black. You could also just work with the purple and make it a purple black and highlight that. Quindy. Yeah, so the power palette isn't the best tool for the entire range right now. But I mean, when you've got something like this, kind of just get close to it and say, okay, what have I got here? I've got a yellowy color, and I've got a gray for sure, and I've maybe got some red and brown mixed in, and I've got a kind of an off-white that, you know, and try to find the closest thing. As long as you're close, you're good. I am using Mahogany Brown, actually. Wyverns are traditionally painted in reddish browns, and so I'm kind of going there, but I'm going more red. Though Mahogany Brown is named brown, it is a very, very red color. So, yeah. But the red they're using here, I think that that's going to be really close. And like I said, I'm not going quite as bright for this Wyvern. I'm using this color scheme, and I was already planning on doing stripes on the wings. Although, with the way that Julie has sculpted the wings, we're going to go, I think, with less marbling and more stripes, like across the grain here. When you've got an up and down texture like this, a vertical texture, you want to kind of go across that. So we're probably going to follow the shape of the wing and do stripes across, like, in a curved arc. Yeah, this is a very, very red. So yeah, so I think those are our starters, pretty much. And then we will modify as we need to. So the question is what I want to go for as a base coat. And I think I'm going to end up doing a lot of mixes of mahogany and the orange brown, and the purple to kind of like get things set up. Then I'll need the nice thing about using Osirian sand is you can see how yellow it is, how golden. It'll mix very well here with our orange to bring our orange up. So we can have it naturally transition there on the underbelly pretty easily, I think. So I think that'll work pretty well. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it looks like a pattern to me, but who knows? It could be either, right? Although, I'll tell you, Pendrake, natural blood vessels, and I studied this for Dance of Death, blood vessels actually go from the sides across. They don't actually go up and down like that, usually. There might be one or two, but usually they're coming from the blood sources are on the either side and up the top. So you see a lot more blood vessel going across the wing this way when you look at bat wings. And also other membranes, like the frog toes, webbed frog toes. You can see the same thing where the veins go across, blood vessels go across. But yeah, you could totally do it either way. I mean, if you do it in the right pattern, it's gonna look right? If you make it like branching, like blood vessels would, you can absolutely do it however you like. But I wanted to do stripes on this guy, so that concept art works great. Let's see here. We got 10 minutes. We could do a little bit of proof of concept. Let's see. Let's try to do the shoulder area. And just see how our mahogany and our Kraken Ink and our orange are going to play. So this is where I will test. And I could also test on a piece of paper if I wanted to. But because it's so easy to paint over areas on models with acrylic paint, I don't mind doing a live test, as I'm pretty darn sure that I want this mahogany brown. And then the question is, how well will the orange brown work with it, or will the orange brown be too muted? I did actually trash, because I was looking for membrane blood vessel patterns, and so I did spend a lot of time looking at frog toes and bat wings. No MAS. What was that, Durham? You should look closely at frog toes. They are almost iridescent in some species. Like, if you want to try to do fake iridescent, non-iridescent, frog toes are not a bad place to start. No other paints? I shouldn't need any. Because when you're doing an animal of any sort, Durham, you should be able, like, I mean, this is actually a fair number of paints if you look at it. Also remember, I choose my paints based on your utility. So, for example, the fact that Osirian Sand is my mid-tone for my underbelly triad, but then I can also pop it over here and make it a highlight for my oranges. That makes it a very high utility color, because I can use it in both places, and that will also, hypothetically, help the areas of the body blend together better, because I'm repeating a color. So, Osirian Sand. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's Pathfinder's version of, like, Egypt is Osiria. But yeah, so if you look at this gives me a pretty good palette out the gate to do the main areas of the figure. I need to add black, but otherwise, if I look at my reference, Durham, I've got my whites, my off-whites, my grays. When I add black, I'll be able to use wolf gray plus that black to get this darker gray here underneath the rib cage in the shadows of the neck. I've got my purpley color for the red shadows. I'll have black again for that. I might add in some blue liner, or I might decide to highlight my black with the purple and see how it works instead. I could, instead of doing this, instead of going with Kraken Ink, I could go with blue liner. So this off black here that makes a purpley color, because if I went with blue liner, it would naturally mix to make a purpley color, but it wouldn't be as good of a purple or as vibrant of a purple as this is. And when I look at this leg, I see a pretty strong purple there. So to me, that says that blue liner plus mahogany isn't going to do it. It's not going to give me that punch. Yeah, Dragon Black. I always use Dragon. No, not Dragon Black, sorry. I only use Pure Black. My apologies. Pure black and pure white. I don't use any other black. I don't use any other white unless it's an off-white. Because those two core colors are the highest pigmented black and white we have, with no other weirdness. Keep in mind that Dragon Black is more of a... Dragon Black has the cool colors, I think, in it. Yeah. So Dragon Black has like a bit of blue in it, and Solid Black is Painter's Black. It's mixed with phthalo blue and brown. So it's made in the way that oil painters used to mix black to make a complicated shadow, not a simple one. So the real true black here, other than the Pathfinder one. The Pathfinder one is also just a true black. It's nothing unusual about it. But otherwise, pure black is the way to go if you don't want any other colors in your black. That said, Solid Black from Bones, from the original HD, is one of the most popular blacks we have ever done, because people really like the black that you get when you mix in that blue and brown to it. So for a lot of painters, that's their favorite black straight out the gate. They don't use pure. Pure black is a dead color. Like coal black and pure black are very they don't really have a presence on the model, right? They're pure neutrals. And so when you use those, they tend to be very boring. Like the eye just doesn't go with them. The eye goes away from them. And so they kind of call it dead spots on a painting when you're using pure black because nobody will look at them. And it doesn't have any life of its own. So to do that, you highlight it with color or you add other colors into it. I see. We're making a joke about Dragon Black. And I took you seriously. But that's okay because I got to talk about him as P Black. Yeah, Noir Black is that faded t-shirt black. The warmest one would be solid black, probably. There's really, I mean, black is a cool color. It's like, we don't have a Mars black where it goes up brown. So I don't think we have a true warm black trash. Nobody seems to want one. Matte black is normally a cooling color. When you add it in, it tends to turn other colors ashy, which tends to cool them off, even if they're not blue. And coal black also tends to highlight slightly blue, just because of the pigment. So, yeah, bye, Dragon Eye. Oh, okay, good. Sometimes I wander on. I would say probably, actually, I'll take that back. You know what the warm black is? Walnut brown. Yeah, that's what I thought, Pendre, or I thought Derek was that Osiria. Osiria or Osirian must be the Egyptian world of the Pathfinder. All right, so let's see how these work. We have just like a few minutes. Coal black is a black teal. It has green and blue in it. Again, this comes back to me not wanting to make you guys pay for the same color over and over. So all of our blacks are different. Okay, so that's really bright. So let's see, just really quick, grab a big smooshy brush. And let's do some wet blend, just real quick. So there's the red, the mahogany red instead of mahogany brown. And I'm just going to do quick block in. And I'm going to try to bring it up toward the top with some burnt orange. See what the color looks like. I like that, actually. See what I mean about burnt orange being a lot more of a saturated orange than you think it is? It actually goes quite, it's not as bright as like a fire orange, but it definitely goes lighter. A big floofy brush like this is great for wet blending. That's good. Let's grab some of our fire. Just kind of put a little bit of fire on the top there. Yeah, coal black plus shark blade is a natural combo. Good idea. I mean, they're both great teals, and they're muted teals, so they would work really well together. So I think that this is what we have. I do think that the orange brown is necessary to have in the middle there. And I think that the fire orange is going to work great as a highest highlight. Let me get my phone up here. So like I said, not quite as bright, not quite as super hyper saturated, but still a good... It's a good combo. What I'm missing is this bright crimson. So essentially this is actually looks like a vermilion perhaps, or a primary red, and they're mixing that in. So that is giving them a lot heavier red, a real red, a true red, as opposed to just a reddish brown. But I don't want to go there. I don't want to get that red. I would like our Wyvern to be more natural. So now I'm going to take my Kraken Ink and see if I can... Oh yeah, have fun with lunch, Shadow Raven. Yum yum. I hope you have tasties. Tasties to nom. So now we're going to thin our Kraken Ink down a little bit. And see if I like it as a shadow there. Kind of coloring it. Yeah, I think that's going to get really close to that purpley red color on the leg of that wyvern. I think that's actually going to be great. So then that's our range. So I like this a lot. I think it's going to make a really, really pretty wyvern that's still going to look like... It's still going to be a little bit more naturalistic than the wyvern in our art source. But it's still going to have a lot of more vibrant color on it. And yet when you look at it, it will be like reddish brown, right? It'll just be a very reddish brown. So yeah, hopefully this color actually comes out in the store soon, MPIT. It was from the Reapercon colors, the pirate colors. It's a beautiful, beautiful purple. Has a lot of transparency to it, which I really love. It's a beautiful, vibrant color. Very utilitarian. So yeah, we'll probably use that then to shade down to the black paws, and we'll still go black with the paws, but we'll do a purple transition leading down to that. So that, and as you can see, it's a nice dark color, and it also turns that mahogany brown kind of a purplish red, which is great. So that all is looking lovely. It's a quick wet blend, and that allows us to kind of test our colors and set them up. I think he's got orange eyes. Let's see. The head on this one is very black and white. So little orange ember eyes. And he's got a very white gullet. So maybe I'll go with kind of a pale flesh color for that. But yeah, so you don't really get the reddish. The reddish starts to creep in over here on the neck. And up here you have more of the black up against the white pattern here. We'll see what I do there. I don't know. I might put a little bit of a red transition in there. But then green eyes might make more sense, right? For the complement. You could also give him blue eyes. Hey, Love of Music. How's it going? We are painting. We're going to paint our wyvern. And so we were looking up an awesome art piece by a Chinese artist, I think. And we really like this one. So we're going to steal these colors, kind of. Not quite as bright, but close. So I was just matching those colors with the gang to show them how I kind of match them and test them. So yeah, I like that wyvern an awful lot. So we'll go with that. But yeah, so now this sets us up, and we'll probably, I mean, I may do just the general wet blend pretty much over the whole thing just to set it up super fast, and then we can tune it. The rust has a lot of red oxide in it, and I don't know that I want to go there. It's a different red, Crows. These colors, there's a little bit of red oxide in them, but in general, they tend to be more yellow and red pigments, yellow or red pigments with just a bit of brown oxide in them. I think the rust might be a little bit too different. Like, okay, I guess you could, but the other thing is, the reason that I wouldn't necessarily is because I like to repeat colors on the model. So if I've already got an orange here that's perfectly serviceable for eyes for this guy, I'm just going to use it. I'm not going to reach for a different orange. Because I really like to repeat colors on the model. I don't like to go for a completely different color that I'm not using anywhere else, if I can help it. Now, eyes sometimes are a different thing. But if you've already got an orange to work with, reaching for another orange, for me, it doesn't make sense. I will caution you, when you're reaching for a different orange, and you've already got orange on the model, make sure that it doesn't clash. Like, put it down next to your other colors, kind of look at it, and make sure it doesn't clash. Because sometimes when you've got different pigments, you can get a bit of clashing there, because all of your oranges will be very close to each other on the color wheel. Kraken eggs. No. Yeah, the art piece is really nice, right, Danoff? I thought so too. I'm glad I went looking for wyvern art, because it turns out that some people do a good job on wyverns and don't just paint them blah. I also liked the olive green and red and browny orange one. That was pretty cool too, but yeah, totally, you could take it up like that. You could also do the yellow plus the fire orange here. Like, with an eye that is so small, you want to go really bright for it. So you might go with, like, maybe a mixture of these two for the start, because you want that bright vibrancy but you also want a little bit more coverage. So maybe mixing both of these, like to get that color, maybe, just for a start. And then probably highlighting up with the orange and then maybe a final dot of Candlelight. But don't start too light with tiny details, because if you start too light, the eye just looks light. You won't get the color. You need a really vibrant color for it to show up in such a tiny area. Mustard is too muted, I think. Candlelight is a better choice. For exactly that same reason. When you mute out a color or you lighten it too much, you don't get as bright of a spot and your eyes just disappear. Pendrake is very good at storylines. Pendrake is the one who should be running a game at ReaperCon. But yeah, so alright, so I'm going to make a note. Remember, we always get our sticky note. Wyvern colors. It's time to make the Wyvern his own sticky note. And the Wyvern's sticky note will be Wyvern. And I will say 9070, 9201 orange brown, fire orange, Kraken Ink, Osirian sand. I'm going to say wolf gray. We'll see about mixings of those. Wolf gray, bleached linen, and then we'll put down here, we'll put pure black / blue liner question mark. Because I may still want that blue highlight on his head. I might go purple instead, but it'll depend. The blue is so nice because it reflects the sky, and it also is a complement to the orange. So now we have my happy sticky note. Ta-da! We now know what we've used. So we are ready for next time. Pendrake, you shortchange yourself. Who cares? If you run a good game, nobody cares what you sound like. Alrighty, got my wolf gray, my Osirian sand. It needs to go over here again. Alright, guys, who do we have? Oh, there we go, Zambies. Alright, we're going to go and visit Zambies. I hope you all have a wonderful time. We worked out colors for our Wyvern today, and we green stuffed his nether regions. So I hope I will see you all tomorrow when we will work on, our new orc. Our new orc is up tomorrow. Ooh, maybe that's the place for me to use olive greens. Alright, I'll see you guys later. Bye!